The sound of wagon wheels grinding through the dusty Colorado earth had become as familiar to Rebecca Barnes as breathing, though nothing about this barren landscape felt like home. She pressed her palm against the rough wooden side of the wagon, squinting through the harsh September sunlight at the cluster of buildings that made up Telluride in 1883, and wondered for the 1,000th time if leaving Massachusetts had been a terrible mistake. The mining town sprawled before her like a collection of children's blocks scattered carelessly between towering mountain peaks. Rebecca's father had died 3 months earlier, leaving her mother alone with debts that swallowed their modest farm whole. When Rebecca's Uncle Thomas wrote offering her work keeping books at his general store out west, the decision had seemed simple. Now, at 22 years old, she sat exhausted and homesick in a wagon driven by a gruff freight hauler who had not spoken more than 10 words during their journey from Denver. The wagon lurched to a stop outside a 2-story building with a painted sign declaring it Barnes General Store. Rebecca climbed down, her legs trembling from days of travel, and smoothed her gray traveling dress. The fabric was coated in a fine layer of dust that seemed to cover everything in this place. Rebecca. A barrel-chested man with graying hair emerged from the store, his face creased with genuine pleasure. Uncle Thomas looked older than she remembered from his visit east 5 years ago, but his smile was the same. He wrapped her in a brief, awkward embrace that smelled of tobacco and coffee. "You made it. Good, good. Your room is upstairs. Get yourself settled and we'll talk business in the morning." That night, lying in a narrow bed beneath a window that framed unfamiliar stars, Rebecca let herself cry quietly. She missed her mother's voice, missed the rolling green hills of home, missed the way morning fog settled over the meadows. But most of all, she missed the apple trees. The old orchard behind their farmhouse had been her sanctuary, a place where pink blossoms promised fruit, and the shade offered cool relief during summer afternoons. Here, there was nothing but dust and rocks and mountains that made her feel impossibly small. The work at the store proved demanding, but not unpleasant. Uncle Thomas needed help with inventory, bookkeeping, and managing the counter when miners came down from the hills for supplies. Rebecca learned quickly which items sold fastest, how to measure out flour and sugar without waste, and which customers paid their tabs promptly versus those who needed gentle reminding. 3 weeks after her arrival, on a crisp October morning when frost sparkled on the boardwalk, a cowboy walked into the store and changed everything. Adam Garrett stood well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though at the moment his expression was serious. "Morning," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I need rope, nails, and fence wire, quite a bit of each." Rebecca pulled out the ledger, trying to ignore how her pulse had quickened. "How much of each?" 200 feet of rope, 10 pounds of nails, and as much fence wire as you can spare." She wrote down the order, very aware of his presence on the other side of the counter. "That will take me a few minutes to gather, building something significant, expanding my ranch." He shifted his weight, and she noticed he moved with a careful precision, like someone used to being mindful of his own strength. "Got land north of town. Raising cattle mostly, but I am planning some other projects." Other projects. Rebecca found herself curious despite her intention to remain professionally distant. "Maybe." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile but heading in that direction. "If they work out, you will probably hear about it. Not much stays secret in Telluride." She gathered his supplies and he paid in cash, counted out carefully from a worn leather wallet. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of someone who worked hard every single day. When their fingers accidentally touched during the transaction, Rebecca pulled back quickly, flustered. "Thank you, Miss Barnes," Adam said, and she realized Uncle Thomas must have mentioned her name. "I will likely be back soon." He was true to his word. Over the next weeks, Adam Garrett became a regular customer, always polite, always paying promptly, always with that hint of something unspoken in his eyes when he looked at her. Rebecca found herself watching for him, listening for the particular cadence of his boot steps on the wooden floor. November brought the first real snow, transforming Telluride into something almost beautiful. Rebecca stood outside the store one afternoon, watching fat flakes drift down from a pewter sky, and felt the familiar ache of homesickness settle over her like a blanket. "You look troubled." Adam's voice startled her. He had approached so quietly she had not heard him coming. Rebecca turned, surprised to find him studying her with genuine concern. "Just thinking about home." "Massachusetts, your uncle said." "Yes. A small town outside Boston, very different from here." Adam leaned against the hitching post, apparently in no hurry despite the cold. "What do you miss most?" The question was simple, but something about the way he asked it, with real interest rather than polite conversation, made Rebecca answer honestly. "The apple trees." We had an orchard behind our house. In spring, the blossoms would cover everything like pink snow, and in fall, the smell of ripe apples would fill the whole property. My father and I would spend days harvesting, and my mother would make pies and preserves. She stopped, embarrassed by how much she had revealed. "It probably sounds silly." "Not silly at all." Adam's expression had gone thoughtful. "Everyone needs something that feels like home." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Rebecca wondering why she had told him so much. December arrived with brutal cold and shortened days. Rebecca settled into a routine. Wake early, help Uncle Thomas open the store, manage customers and inventory until evening, then retreat upstairs to read by lamplight before sleeping. It was a quiet life, a lonely life, but she was earning money to send back to her mother, and that mattered. 2 days before Christmas, Uncle Thomas announced he was traveling to Denver for a week to meet with suppliers. "You will manage fine without me," he said, wrapping a thick scarf around his neck. "Sam Porter will help if you need heavy lifting, and most folks are honest enough not to take advantage of a young woman running the place alone." Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness but nodded. She could handle a week. She had to. The store was busy those days before Christmas, with miners buying small luxuries to celebrate the holiday and ranchers stocking up before the worst of winter hit. Rebecca worked from dawn until well past dark, falling into bed exhausted each night. On Christmas Eve, just as she was about to close up, Adam Garrett walked in. He carried a large burlap sack that clinked mysteriously. "I know you are about to close," he said, "but I wanted to drop this off." Rebecca looked at him curiously. "Drop what off?" He set the sack on the counter with a heavy thunk. "Jars. Your uncle mentioned you might be interested in selling preserves and pickled goods. I have more jars than I need, so I thought you could use them." She opened the sack, finding 24 clean glass jars in various sizes. "This is very generous, but I cannot just take these. Consider it a Christmas gift." Adam's eyes were warm in the lamplight. "Besides, I am hoping you might consider making some of those apple preserves you mentioned, if apples ever make their way to Telluride." Rebecca felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. It was such a small kindness, but it touched something deep inside her. "Thank you, really thank you. Merry Christmas, Miss Barnes." He turned to leave, then paused. "If you are not busy tomorrow, some of the folks in town gather at the church for dinner. You would be welcome. She went to the church dinner and found herself seated across from Adam at a long table crowded with people she barely knew. He made conversation easy, introducing her to ranchers and miners and their families, making sure she never felt left out. When someone broke out a fiddle after dinner and people started dancing, Adam asked her if she would like to try. Rebecca had not danced in months, not since before her father died. Adam was surprisingly graceful for such a large man, leading her through simple patterns while the fiddle sang cheerful tunes. His hand on her waist was warm and steady, and Rebecca realized with a start that she felt happy, truly happy, for the first time since arriving in Colorado. "You are a good dancer," she said, slightly breathless when the song ended. "My mother insisted I learn." Said a man who could dance was a man who could listen to a partner. He smiled, and this time it was a full, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. She was usually right about things. January 1884 arrived with savage cold and snow that piled against buildings in massive drifts. Rebecca worried about her uncle, but a telegram arrived confirming he was staying in Denver until the roads cleared. She managed the store alone, grateful for regular customers like Adam who checked on her and made sure she had enough firewood. One afternoon, during a brief clear spell, Adam arrived with a wagon and an unusual request. "I need to pick up supplies in Montrose," he said. "3-day trip there and back. I was wondering if you might want to come along. Your uncle mentioned you have been cooped up in the store for weeks, and the fresh air might do you good. We would stay in proper hotels, separate rooms of course, and I give you my word you would be perfectly safe." Rebecca knew she should say no. An unmarried woman traveling alone with a man, even one as respectful as Adam, would cause talk. But the thought of 3 days away from the store, of seeing new country, of spending time with Adam was too tempting. "I will come," she said, and his face lit up like she had given him a precious gift. They left before dawn 2 days later, the wagon packed with items to trade in Montrose. Adam had loaded extra blankets and a basket of food prepared by the woman who ran the boarding house. The road wound through spectacular mountain country, with peaks soaring above them and frozen waterfalls clinging to cliff faces. Adam proved to be excellent company. He told her about growing up in Wyoming, about learning ranch work from his father, about coming to Colorado 5 years ago to start his own place. He asked about her life in Massachusetts, and Rebecca found herself talking about her childhood, her parents, her dreams of maybe teaching school someday. "Why did you not become a teacher?" Adam asked as the wagon climbed a particularly steep section of road. "Money, mostly. My father got sick, and we needed every penny for doctors and medicine. After he died, there was no money for normal school." Rebecca pulled her coat tighter against the wind. "Maybe someday when things are more settled." They reached Montrose late the second day, checking into a small hotel where the owner eyed them suspiciously until Adam explained about the separate rooms. Rebecca soaked in a real bath, washing away the trail dust, and changed into her only good dress for dinner. When she came downstairs, Adam was waiting in the lobby. He had cleaned up too, wearing a pressed shirt and vest, his hair still damp from washing. The look on his face when he saw her made Rebecca's breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply and offered his arm. They ate at a restaurant that served the best food Rebecca had tasted in months. Over roast chicken and potatoes, Adam told her about his plans for the ranch, how he wanted to build something lasting, something he could be proud of. "It can be lonely, though," he admitted, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. "The ranch, I mean. Beautiful country, good work, but lonely." Rebecca understood exactly what he meant. Colorado is lonely for me too. Maybe it gets easier with time. Maybe. Adam met her eyes across the table. Or maybe the right company makes all the difference. The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Rebecca felt her heart beating faster, felt the pull toward this quiet, kind man who made her laugh, and listened when she talked and looked at her like she was something precious. That night back at the hotel, Adam walked her to her door. They stood in the dimly lit hallway, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "Rebecca," Adam said, his voice rough. "I know we have not known each other long, but I need you to know that I care about you. More than I probably should, more than is wise maybe, but I do." Rebecca's hand trembled as she reached up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw. "I care about you too." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, asking permission with every movement. Rebecca kissed him back, feeling like something locked inside her was finally opening. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I should let you sleep," Adam said, though he made no move to leave. "You should," Rebecca agreed, but she was smiling. The trip back to Telluride seemed both too long and too short. They talked constantly, learning each other in 100 small ways. Adam told her about the nightmares he still had from a cattle stampede that nearly killed him 3 years earlier. Rebecca confessed her fear that she would never feel truly at home in Colorado. They discovered they both loved thunderstorms, both hated oysters, both dreamed of traveling to San Francisco someday. By the time they rolled back into Telluride, something fundamental had shifted between them. They were not just acquaintances anymore, not even just friends. They were two people falling in love, and everyone who saw them together could tell. Uncle Thomas returned from Denver a week later, took one look at Rebecca's face when Adam came into the store, and pulled her aside. "That cowboy been courting you properly?" he asked bluntly. Rebecca felt her cheeks flame. "He has been a perfect gentleman. Good. He is a good man far as I can tell, works hard, pays his debts, does not drink to excess. You could do worse." Uncle Thomas softened slightly. "You could do better too, probably, but not in Telluride." February brought more snow and bitter cold, but Rebecca barely noticed. Adam visited the store almost daily, often staying to help with heavy work or just to talk with her during slow periods. On Sundays, when the store was closed, they went on walks through the snowy town, bundled in coats and scarves, talking about everything and nothing. One Sunday in late February, Adam took her to see his ranch for the first time. It sat in a small valley north of town, with a sturdy log cabin, a barn, and extensive corrals. Mountains rose on 3 sides, creating a natural amphitheater that sheltered the property from the worst winds. "It is not much yet," Adam said as they stood looking at the cabin, "but I have big plans. More cattle, better breeding stock, maybe some horses." "It is wonderful," Rebecca said honestly. She could see the potential in the land, could imagine it thriving under Adam's careful stewardship. He took her inside the cabin, which was neat but sparse. One main room with a stone fireplace, a small bedroom partitioned off with rough lumber, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove. It was clearly a bachelor's quarters, functional but lacking any warmth or personality. "It needs a woman's touch," Adam said, watching her reaction carefully. "I am not much for decorating." Rebecca walked to the window, looking out at the snowy valley. "The view is spectacular." "Rebecca." Adam came to stand behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I know it is too soon, probably too fast, but I need to ask you something." She turned to face him, her heart racing. "I am falling in love with you," Adam said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "Maybe I already have fallen in love with you. I want to build a life here, a real life, and I cannot imagine doing it without you. I know you miss your home, Miss Massachusetts, miss those apple trees. I know this place is hard and lonely sometimes. But I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy, trying to build something here that feels like home to you." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "Adam, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything yet. I just needed you to know how I feel." He reached out, gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Take all the time you need." That night, back in her room above the store, Rebecca lay awake thinking. She did love Adam, she was sure of that now. But could she really commit to staying in Colorado forever? Could she build a life so far from everything she had known? She thought about writing to her mother for advice, but she already knew what her mother would say. Sarah Barnes had married for love despite her parents' objections, had chosen a poor farmer over a wealthy merchant's son, and had never regretted it for a moment. She would tell Rebecca to follow her heart. March arrived with the first hints of spring. The snow began to melt, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. Rebecca noticed Adam seemed preoccupied during his visits to the store, distracted in a way that was unlike him. When she asked if something was wrong, he just said he was working on a project. One afternoon, when Rebecca mentioned missing the apple trees again while talking to Mrs. Chen, who ran the boarding house, Adam overheard from where he was loading supplies into his wagon. He did not say anything, but his expression grew thoughtful. Over the next weeks, Adam's visits to the store became less frequent. When he did come by, he seemed exhausted, with dirt under his fingernails and new calluses on his palms. Rebecca worried that he was working himself too hard, but when she expressed concern, he just kissed her forehead and promised everything was fine. "I will show you soon," he said mysteriously. "Just need to finish something first." April brought warmer weather and the first green shoots pushing through the earth. Rebecca helped Uncle Thomas with inventory, preparing for the spring rush when miners would return to claims abandoned over winter, and ranchers would need supplies for the busy season ahead. On a bright April morning, Adam arrived at the store just as Rebecca was opening up. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a way she had never seen before. "Come with me," he said. "Please, I need to show you something." Rebecca grabbed her shawl and followed him to his wagon. They drove north toward his ranch, but instead of stopping at the cabin, Adam guided the horses up a small rise she had never explored before. At the top, he helped her down and led her by the hand to a spot overlooking his valley. Rebecca gasped. Below them, arranged in careful rows across what must have been 2 acres of carefully prepared ground, stood 40 small trees. They were barely more than saplings, their branches still thin and fragile but unmistakable in their form. Apple trees. 40 apple trees. "You planted apple trees," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. "I ordered them from a nursery in Kansas back in January," Adam said, his words coming in a rush. "Had them shipped to Denver, picked them up myself 2 weeks ago. Been working every spare hour getting them in the ground before spring really hits. I know they might not all survive, know it will be years before they produce fruit, but I wanted you to have something from home. Wanted you to know that I heard you, that I remember what matters to you." Rebecca could not speak. She looked at the neat rows of saplings, at the irrigation ditches Adam had dug, at the stakes he had placed to protect the young trees from wind and animals. This represented weeks of backbreaking labor, significant expense, and a commitment to a future that included her. "I know I am just a cowboy," Adam continued, anxiety creeping into his voice. "I know I cannot give you everything you left behind, but I can give you this. I can give you apple trees and a home and every bit of love I have. Rebecca Barnes, will you marry me?" She turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and launched herself into his arms. "Yes, Yes, of course, yes. Adam caught her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around while she laughed and cried simultaneously. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and hope and promise into it. Rebecca kissed him back, tasting salt from her tears and not caring even a little bit. "I love you," she said against his mouth. "I love you so much. I love you too." Adam pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands gentle on her cheeks. "We will make this work. We will build something beautiful here." They sat in the grass on that hillside for hours, making plans and dreaming out loud. They would marry in June, would expand the cabin to include a proper parlor and more bedrooms for the children they both wanted. Rebecca would keep working at the store until they had enough saved to hire help at the ranch. They would tend the apple trees together, would watch them grow and thrive, would eventually harvest fruit and make the preserves Rebecca remembered from childhood. The wedding took place on a brilliant June day in 1884, in the small church where Rebecca had danced with Adam on Christmas. Uncle Thomas walked her down the aisle, and half the town showed up to witness the ceremony. Rebecca wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace borrowed from Mrs. Chen. Adam wore a new suit that made him look almost uncomfortable, though his eyes never left Rebecca's face. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Adam kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception featured food and dancing and well wishes that lasted into the evening. Rebecca danced with her new husband, with her uncle, with miners and ranchers and shopkeepers who had become her community. Late that night, Adam carried Rebecca over the threshold of the cabin, which he had spent weeks fixing up. There were new curtains on the windows, a colorful quilt on the bed, and a rocking chair positioned to catch the afternoon sun. Rebecca recognized touches from several of the town's women and felt her heart swell with gratitude for how fully she had been welcomed. "Happy?" Adam asked, setting her down gently. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Rebecca answered honestly. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The ranch demanded constant work, and Rebecca learned to manage tasks she had never imagined doing. She helped with branding cattle, learned to ride a horse competently if not gracefully, and discovered she had a talent for keeping the ranch's books organized. The apple trees survived that first year, though two succumbed to a late frost, and one was destroyed by a deer that got through the fencing. Adam replanted, and Rebecca spent hours tending the young orchard, watering and pruning and protecting her precious trees. Uncle Thomas proved surprisingly understanding about Rebecca reducing her hours at the store. He hired a young man to help with heavy work and seemed genuinely pleased to see his niece so happy. On Sundays, Adam and Rebecca often had dinner with him, and the three of them would sit on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains while discussing politics, weather, and town gossip. In the fall of their first year together, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Adam one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went very still, then slowly set down the coffee cup he had been holding. "A baby." His voice was rough with emotion. "Yes, probably arrive next spring." Adam crossed the room in 2 long strides and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. Rebecca felt him trembling and realized he was crying, overwhelmed with joy and probably fear too. She held him tightly, this strong man who had given her so much, and promised silently that they would face parenthood together. The pregnancy was not easy. Rebecca suffered terrible sickness in the early months, barely able to keep food down. Adam hovered anxiously, bringing her water and crackers, adjusting pillows, reading to her during the worst spells. As winter arrived, she began to feel better, though she grew large enough that riding horses became impossible and she waddled more than walked. Their son was born on a rainy April morning in 1885, after a labor that lasted nearly 20 hours. The doctor from town and Mrs. Chen both attended, while Adam paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal. When Rebecca finally held their baby, with Adam kneeling beside the bed and staring in wonder at the tiny face, she felt a love so fierce it almost frightened her. "He is perfect," Adam whispered, carefully touching one impossibly small hand. "What should we name him?" "James," Rebecca said, thinking of her father. "James Thomas Garrett." Adam looked at her with so much love that Rebecca felt her breath catch. "James Thomas Garrett. He is going to have a good life. We will make sure of it." Jamie, as they quickly began calling him, proved to be a demanding baby. He cried frequently, slept poorly, and wanted constant attention. Rebecca, exhausted and overwhelmed, sometimes cried along with him during those first difficult months. Adam helped as much as he could, walking the baby for hours when he would not settle, changing nappies without complaint, and constantly reassuring Rebecca that she was doing fine. By summer, things had settled into a routine of sorts. Jamie began sleeping longer stretches, which meant Rebecca slept more too. She could take him outside to a blanket under the trees, where he would watch the leaves move and occasionally produce a smile that made all the hard nights worthwhile. The apple trees were thriving. In their third year now, they stood nearly 6 feet tall, with strong trunks and healthy branches. Adam had enclosed the orchard with proper fencing and installed a better irrigation system that drew water from the creek. No fruit yet, but Rebecca could wait. Some things worth having required patience. That fall, Uncle Thomas suffered a heart attack. He survived, but it left him weak and unable to manage the store effectively. Adam and Rebecca spent hours discussing what to do, finally deciding that Rebecca would take over managing the store full-time while hiring someone to help Adam at the ranch. It meant less time together, but it also meant securing their financial future and honoring the opportunity Uncle Thomas had given Rebecca. They found a good hand for the ranch, a young man named Peter who had grown up on a farm in Kansas and knew cattle well. He moved into the small bunkhouse Adam built near the barn, and proved to be a hard worker who could be trusted to handle things when Adam needed to be in town. Rebecca hired a woman named Margaret to watch Jamie while she worked at the store. It broke her heart to leave her son, but she cherished the hours each evening when she could focus entirely on him, playing and reading and singing the lullabies her own mother had sung. Life developed a rhythm. Busy but good, challenging but rewarding. The ranch grew, with more cattle and better breeding stock. The store prospered as Telluride itself grew, attracting more miners and more families. Uncle Thomas recovered enough to sit in the store offering advice and gossiping with longtime customers, which seemed to give him genuine pleasure. The apple trees had their first blooms in the spring of 1887, delicate pink flowers that covered the orchard like Rebecca had described from her childhood. She stood among the trees with 3-year-old Jamie chasing butterflies at her feet and felt a sense of peace so complete it brought tears to her eyes. Adam found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Are you crying?" he asked gently. "Happy tears. Look at them, Adam. They are exactly like I remembered. They are beautiful." He kissed the top of her head. "Not as beautiful as you, but close." That fall they harvested their first apples. Not many, the trees were still young, but enough to make a few pies and a small batch of preserves. Rebecca used the jars Adam had given her that Christmas before they married, carefully following her mother's old recipes. When she tasted the finished preserves, the flavor transported her instantly to childhood, to safety and love and home. She sent a jar to her mother in Massachusetts with a long letter describing her life, the ranch, the orchard, and her beautiful son. Sarah Barnes wrote back with joy and pride, saying she hoped to visit someday and see this new life her daughter had built. In the spring of 1888, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy felt easier somehow, maybe because she knew what to expect, or maybe because she was not trying to work at the store during the worst of the sickness. She told Jamie he would be a big brother, and he seemed thrilled even though he probably did not fully understand. Their daughter arrived in December, during a snowstorm that nearly prevented the doctor from making it to the ranch. Rebecca labored in the bedroom while Adam tried to keep Jamie occupied and calm despite his own anxiety. When the baby finally came, healthy and squalling, Adam brought Jamie in to meet his sister. "What should we call her?" Adam asked, holding the tiny bundle while Jamie peered at her suspiciously. "Rose," Rebecca said, "after your mother." Adam's eyes went suspiciously bright. His mother had died 2 years earlier back in Wyoming, and Rebecca knew he still grieved her loss. "Rose Margaret Garrett, my mother would have loved that." With 2 children, the ranch household became chaotic and loud and wonderful. Jamie proved to be a devoted big brother, always wanting to help with the baby and proudly showing her his toys. Rebecca balanced managing the store with motherhood, grateful for Margaret's help and for Adam's constant support. The orchard continued to grow and flourish. Each spring brought more blossoms, each fall brought more apples. By 1890, they were harvesting enough fruit to sell preserves at the store, which became popular with townspeople and miners alike. Rebecca taught Margaret how to make them, and the 2 women spent long autumn days in the kitchen, cooking and jarring and laughing together. Uncle Thomas died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1891, at the age of 67. Rebecca grieved deeply for the man who had given her a chance when she needed it most. In his will, he left the store to Rebecca, along with a letter expressing how proud he was of the life she had built. "He was a good man," Adam said as they stood at his grave after the funeral. "He gave me the greatest gift when he brought you here." With ownership of the store, Rebecca made changes she had been considering for years. She expanded the inventory to include more items for families, started carrying books and toys, and set up a small lending library in one corner. The store became a gathering place for the community, somewhere people came not just to buy supplies, but to socialize and share news. The ranch thrived too. Adam's careful breeding program produced cattle that commanded premium prices, and he began to develop a reputation as someone who knew livestock. Other ranchers sought his advice, and he sometimes served as a consultant, bringing in additional income that they saved for their children's future. Jamie started school in the fall of 1891, walking to the small schoolhouse in Telluride each morning with his lunch pail and slate. He loved learning, coming home each day bursting with information about geography or arithmetic or spelling. Rebecca saw echoes of her younger self in his enthusiasm for education and encouraged him constantly. Rose grew into a spirited child, fearless and curious. She followed her father everywhere when he was home, demanding to help with ranch work even though she was barely old enough to walk steadily. Adam doted on her shamelessly, and Rebecca often found the 2 of them in the barn, Adam patiently explaining how to care for the horses while Rose listened with intense concentration. In 1893, Rebecca's mother finally made the journey west to visit. Sarah Barnes arrived in August, stepping off the stagecoach with tears streaming down her face. Rebecca ran to embrace her, and they held each other tightly while Adam gathered the luggage, and the children watched with wide eyes. "Let me look at you," Sarah said, holding Rebecca at arm's length. You look wonderful. Happy. I was so worried sending you out here alone, but you have built something beautiful. Sarah stayed for 3 months, long enough to help with the apple harvest and to get to know her grandchildren thoroughly. She and Adam became friends, bonding over their shared love for Rebecca and their mutual enjoyment of Jamie's constant questions. When it came time for her to return to Massachusetts, Sarah pulled Rebecca aside. "I was wrong to worry," she said. "Adam is a good man, better than I dared hope for. And this place, it suits you. You have made it home." "I have," Rebecca agreed. "I still miss Massachusetts sometimes, miss you terribly, but this is home now. This is where I belong." After her mother left, Rebecca felt a shift inside herself. She had been holding onto a piece of her past, a small part that still identified as an Easterner temporarily living out west. Now she let that go, fully embracing her identity as a Colorado ranch woman, a business owner, a mother, a wife. The orchard reached maturity, producing abundant harvests that required hiring additional help during picking season. Rebecca sold preserves and dried apples to stores throughout the region, developing a small but profitable business. She taught Rose how to make preserves using the old family recipes, passing down knowledge from one generation to the next. In 1895, Adam surprised Rebecca by suggesting they expand the house. With Jamie now 10 and Rose 7, they needed more space. Plus, Adam said with a meaningful look, they might have more children someday and should plan ahead. They added a proper parlor, 2 more bedrooms, and a larger kitchen. Adam did much of the work himself, with help from Peter and some of the men from town. Rebecca watched the house take shape and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built together. That winter, during a quiet evening with snow falling outside and the children already in bed, Adam and Rebecca sat together in the new parlor. Adam was reading a ranching journal while Rebecca worked on mending a shirt. The fire crackled cheerfully and everything felt peaceful and right. "Do you ever regret it?" Adam asked suddenly, setting down his journal. "Regret what?" "Staying here. Marrying me. Giving up whatever life you might have had back east." Rebecca set down her sewing and moved to sit beside him on the settee. She took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength in his fingers. "I have never regretted it, not for a single moment. You gave me everything I needed, Adam. You listened when I said I missed the apple trees, and you planted an orchard. You have been patient with my homesickness, supportive of my work at the store, and the most wonderful father our children could ask for. How could I possibly regret any of that? I just want you to be happy." "I am happy. Truly, completely happy." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Rebecca felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt that first time in the hotel hallway in Montrose. After more than a decade together, she still loved him as much as ever, maybe even more. In 1897, their 3rd child was born, another son they named Thomas after Rebecca's uncle. At 36, Rebecca found this pregnancy more difficult than the previous 2, and the birth itself was complicated. The doctor warned them that having more children would be risky, and Adam immediately declared they were done. "We have 3 healthy children and each other," he said firmly. "I will not risk losing you for anything." Thomas was a quiet baby, easy and content, in a way his siblings had not been. Jamie, now 12, helped care for him with a responsibility beyond his years. Rose, nearly 9, treated her baby brother like a living doll, constantly wanting to hold him and sing to him and show him her toys. The ranch continued to prosper. Adam expanded into horse breeding, developing a line of sturdy saddle horses that sold well to ranchers and the army. The work was demanding, but Peter had proven himself invaluable, essentially serving as a foreman and allowing Adam to focus on the breeding program and business development. The store also thrived under Rebecca's management. Telluride had grown into a real town, with multiple streets, several saloons, a proper school, and even a small hospital. The mining industry continued to boom, bringing more people and more prosperity. Rebecca employed 3 people now, which gave her more time to spend at the ranch with her family. The orchard had become something of a local landmark. Each spring, people came from town just to see the blossoms, spreading their blankets under the trees for picnics and celebrations. Each fall, the harvest drew workers from throughout the area, turning into a social event as much as a business necessity. Rebecca loved those busy autumn days, surrounded by people and laughter and the sweet smell of ripe apples. In 1900, as the new century began, Rebecca stood in her orchard on a perfect spring day and took stock of her life. She was 39 years old, married to a man she loved more with each passing year, mother to 3 remarkable children, owner of a successful business, and tending to an orchard that had become her greatest joy. The trees were in full bloom, pink petals drifting down like snow whenever the breeze picked up. Thomas toddled between the rows, chasing butterflies and occasionally falling down only to get right back up. Rose was in town with friends, and Jamie was helping his father repair fencing on the far side of the property. Adam appeared through the trees, smiling when he spotted her. At 43, he had threads of gray in his dark hair and more lines around his eyes, but Rebecca thought he had never looked more handsome. "Thought I might find you here," he said, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Where else would I be?" Rebecca leaned back against his chest, content. "You remember the day I showed you these trees, when I asked you to marry me, of course. I cried so hard I could barely see. I was terrified you would say no. Terrified I was being too presumptuous, moving too fast, offering you something you did not want." Rebecca turned in his arms to face him. "You offered me everything I wanted. You just understood it better than I did at the time. I love you, Rebecca Garrett. More than apples, more than this ranch, more than anything except our children. I love you too, Adam. Thank you for the trees. Thank you for understanding what home means." He kissed her there among the blooming apple trees, and Rebecca felt the same surge of love and gratitude she had felt that day on the hillside when he first showed her what he had done. He had listened to her heart and responded with action. He had turned a homesick girl's longing into reality, had planted 40 saplings to prove his love, had built a life that honored both who she had been and who she was becoming. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes and challenges of life. Jamie went off to college in Denver in 1903, determined to study agriculture and bring modern techniques back to the ranch. Rose proved to be a talented artist, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the mountains, the ranch, and especially the apple orchard. Thomas grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved reading and spent hours in the lending library at the store. Adam's hair turned fully gray, and he moved a bit slower than he once had, but he still rose before dawn to check on the cattle and horses. Rebecca developed spectacles for reading, and her hands occasionally ached from arthritis, but she still made preserves each fall and still kept meticulous books for both the store and the ranch. In 1908, Jamie returned from college with a degree and a young woman named Catherine whom he planned to marry. The wedding took place in the orchard in June, with white ribbons hanging from the apple tree branches and half the county in attendance. Rebecca cried happy tears as she watched her son exchange vows under the same trees his father had planted to win her heart. Jamie and Catherine built a house on the far end of the ranch property, and Jamie took over more of the daily operations. This allowed Adam to slow down a bit, spending more time with Rebecca and their younger children. They took long walks through the orchard, discussed improvements to the store, and simply enjoyed being together after so many busy years. Rose went to Denver herself in 1910 to study art at a special school for young women. She wrote home regularly, her letters full of excitement about her classes and the city and the interesting people she was meeting. Rebecca missed her daughter terribly, but was proud of her courage in pursuing her passion. Thomas showed no interest in ranching or business. He loved books and learning, eventually winning a scholarship to study at the University of Colorado. Adam and Rebecca worried about affording his education, but the store and ranch had prospered enough that they could manage. They sent him off with pride and only a little trepidation. In 1912, Jamie and Catherine presented Adam and Rebecca with their first grandchild, a girl they named Rebecca Sarah after both grandmothers. Rebecca held the tiny baby and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Adam was equally smitten, this gruff cowboy reduced to making silly faces to earn baby smiles. The orchard continued to produce, though Rebecca had gradually turned over most of the preserve-making operation to younger women she had trained. She still supervised and still made a few batches herself each year using her mother's recipes, but she was content to let others do the heavy work. On a warm evening in September 1915, Adam and Rebecca sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching the sun set over the mountains. They were both in their 50s now, officially middle-aged, with grown children and a grandchild and a life full of memories. "You remember what you said that first night we talked outside the store?" Rebecca asked. "When I told you about missing the apple trees. I said everyone needs something that feels like home. You were right. But what I did not understand then was that home is not just a place or a thing. It is the people we love and the life we build together." Adam reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers like they had done 1,000 times before. "The trees were just the beginning. The real gift was you taking a chance on a lonely cowboy who fell in love with an Eastern girl who missed her orchard. Best chance I ever took." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to appear. Inside the house, they could hear Catherine putting young Rebecca to bed, singing a lullaby. Somewhere out in the valley, cattle lowed softly, the familiar sounds of home. Rose came back from Denver in 1916, having completed her studies. She had sold several paintings and had developed a modest reputation as an artist. She announced she was not getting married, that she intended to focus on her art and live independently. Some people in town gossiped about it, but Adam and Rebecca supported their daughter completely. Rose built a small studio near the orchard and spent her days painting. The apple trees featured prominently in her work, depicted in all seasons and all lights. Her paintings sold well to tourists and wealthy visitors to Telluride, providing her with a comfortable income. Rebecca loved having her daughter nearby again, loved their long talks while walking through the orchard. Thomas graduated from university in 1917 and surprised everyone by announcing he was going to law school. The country was at war in Europe, and many young men were enlisting, but Thomas's eyesight was too poor for military service. He threw himself into his studies instead, determined to serve his community through the law. Jamie and Catherine had 2 more children by 1918, giving Adam and Rebecca 3 grandchildren to dote on. The ranch house was often full of noise and laughter, with children running through the rooms and spilling out into the yard. Rebecca, now in her late 50s, sometimes felt tired from all the activity, but she would not have traded it for anything. The store faced challenges as the mining industry began to slow in Telluride. But Rebecca adapted by expanding into mail-order sales and offering products specifically for the ranching community. She hired Thomas when he finished law school to handle contracts and legal matters, and the combination of legal services and retail proved successful. In 1920, Sarah Barnes died peacefully in her sleep in Massachusetts at the age of 82. Rebecca traveled east for the funeral, her first time back in more than 35 years. The old farmhouse looked smaller than she remembered, and the apple orchard behind it had been cut down years ago to make room for other development. Rebecca felt sad but not devastated. Her mother had lived a good long life, and Rebecca's own orchard in Colorado honored her memory better than any old trees in Massachusetts could. When she returned to Telluride, Adam met her at the stagecoach. He looked older and more tired than when she had left, and Rebecca realized with a jolt that they were getting old together. But when he smiled at her, she saw the same man who had planted 40 apple trees to win her heart. "Welcome home," he said, pulling her into his arms. "It is good to be home," she replied, and meant it completely. The 1920s brought change to Telluride and to the Garrett family. The mining industry continued its decline, and many families moved away seeking opportunities elsewhere. The town that had been so vibrant when Rebecca first arrived was quieter now, more settled, with fewer wild frontier edges and more established community roots. Adam finally retired from active ranch work in 1924, turning over complete control to Jamie. At 63, his body had accumulated too many injuries and too much hard use to keep working the way he once had. He stayed involved in breeding decisions and business planning, but the physical work fell to younger men. Rebecca similarly stepped back from the store, promoting one of her longtime employees to manager while keeping ownership and occasional oversight. She was 63 herself, and while still sharp mentally, she found she had less energy for 12-hour days on her feet. This newfound leisure time allowed Adam and Rebecca to simply enjoy each other's company in ways they had not been able to during the busy years of building businesses and raising children. They took trips together, visiting Jamie and Catherine, spending time with their grandchildren, and traveling to Denver occasionally to see Thomas, who had established a successful law practice there. But mostly, they spent time in the orchard. The apple trees were mature now, massive and productive, with thick trunks and extensive canopies. They required less maintenance than in the early years, mostly just pruning and protection from pests. Adam and Rebecca would walk through the rows in the early morning or late evening, discussing memories and plans and the simple pleasure of being alive. "I have been thinking," Adam said one spring morning in 1926 as they walked among the blossoming trees. "We should write down the story of these trees, how they got here, what they mean, for the grandchildren so they understand." "That is a lovely idea," Rebecca agreed. She had been thinking along similar lines, wanting to preserve the story of how a homesick girl and a determined cowboy had built a life together. They spent that summer working on the project together, sitting on the porch with notebooks and pencils, trying to capture the memories accurately. Rebecca wrote about leaving Massachusetts, about her first difficult months in Telluride, about falling in love with Adam. Adam wrote about deciding to plant the orchard, about ordering the saplings and preparing the ground, about how nervous he had been that Rebecca would think it was too much too soon. Rose helped them organize the writing and even created a series of paintings to illustrate the story. Thomas, visiting from Denver, edited their prose and offered legal advice about preserving the document for future generations. Jamie built a special box to hold the pages and paintings, crafted from apple wood harvested during pruning. In the fall of 1927, they presented the completed project to their family during the apple harvest. 3 generations gathered in the orchard, from Adam and Rebecca down to their great-grandchildren, and listened as Rose read the story aloud. When she finished, there were tears and hugs and a profound sense of connection to this place and this family history. "You did this for Grandma," young Rebecca, now 15, asked Adam in wonder. "You planted 40 trees just because she was homesick." "I did," Adam confirmed. "And I would do it again in a heartbeat." Rebecca squeezed his hand, overwhelmed with love for this man who had understood what she needed even before she fully understood it herself. The Depression hit in 1929, bringing economic hardship even to prosperous operations like the Garrett Ranch and Store. Adam and Rebecca, with the wisdom of age and experience, had saved conservatively over the years and weathered the crisis better than many. They were able to extend credit to struggling neighbors, to keep employees on payroll when other businesses were laying people off, and to provide support to their children during difficult times. Through it all, the orchard continued to produce. Apples became an affordable source of nutrition during hard times, and Rebecca's preserves remained popular because they offered a taste of comfort and normalcy. The family joke was that Adam's romantic gesture had turned into an economic lifeline, proving that love could be practical as well as beautiful. In 1933, Adam suffered a stroke that left his right side weakened and his speech slightly slurred. Rebecca nursed him through the recovery, patient and loving as he struggled to regain his strength. He improved but never fully recovered, requiring a cane for walking and needing frequent rest. The stroke forced Adam to confront his mortality in a way he had not before. He made sure all his affairs were in order, worked with Thomas to update his will, and had long conversations with Jamie about the future of the ranch. But mostly, he spent time with Rebecca, saying all the things he wanted her to know while he still could. "I have loved you every single day," he told her one evening as they sat in the parlor. "Even the hard days, the days when we fought or struggled or everything went wrong, I never stopped loving you." "I know," Rebecca said softly. "I have felt it in everything you have done, every choice you have made. You showed me love through action, through 40 apple trees that grew into an orchard that fed our family and our community. That is a gift beyond measure." Adam lived for 5 more years, gradually declining but still mentally sharp and deeply connected to his family. He celebrated his 80th birthday in 1941, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The party was held in the orchard, naturally, under the trees that had defined so much of his adult life. He died peacefully in his sleep in November 1941, just before the attack on Pearl Harbor plunged the nation into another world war. Rebecca held his hand as he took his last breath, then sat beside his body for hours, remembering their life together and feeling grateful for every moment they had shared. The funeral was massive, with people coming from throughout Colorado to pay their respects. Adam had been respected as a rancher, admired as a businessman, and loved as a friend and neighbor. But Rebecca knew the core of who he was. A man who had listened to a lonely girl talk about missing apple trees and had responded with love made tangible. She continued living at the ranch for several more years, cared for by Jamie and Catherine, and visited frequently by Rose and Thomas and all the grandchildren. She still walked in the orchard every day, weather permitting, feeling close to Adam among the trees he had planted. In 1945, as World War II ended and the nation began to heal, Rebecca's own health began to fail. She had developed heart problems, and the doctor warned her family that she likely did not have much time left. She faced the news calmly, ready to join Adam after 4 lonely years without him. On a bright October morning during harvest season, with the orchard full of workers picking apples and the air sweet with fruit, Rebecca asked Rose to wheel her out among the trees one last time. They sat in the dappled shade, watching the activity and breathing in the familiar scents. "It has been a good life," Rebecca said quietly. "Better than I ever imagined when I arrived in Telluride that hot September day so long ago." "You and Father built something amazing," Rose replied, tears in her eyes. "This orchard, the ranch, the store, all of it. But mostly, you showed us what love looks like when it is real and deep and lasting. Your father showed me that. I was just smart enough to accept it." Rebecca closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of harvest, feeling the breeze on her face, remembering Adam's smile the day he showed her the saplings he had planted. She felt tired but content, ready to rest. She died later that afternoon, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, with the scent of apples drifting through the window and the autumn sun painting everything gold. She was 84 years old and had lived to see her family prosper, her orchard thrive, and her love story become legend in the valley where she had made her home. Jamie and his descendants kept the ranch running for generations. Rose's paintings of the orchard became valuable and sought after, hanging in galleries and museums throughout the West. Thomas's legal practice evolved into a firm that still bears the Garrett name. But the orchard remained the heart of the family legacy, a living monument to love and commitment, and the power of really listening to what someone needs. The trees Adam planted in the winter and spring of 1884 lived for more than 100 years, some of them still producing fruit well into the 21st century. The orchard he created to win Rebecca's heart became a tourist attraction, a family business, and a reminder that love is not just words or feelings but actions taken and commitments kept. And every spring, when the apple blossoms turned the valley pink and white, people would tell the story of how it all began. A lonely girl from Massachusetts who missed the trees from home. A cowboy who heard her sadness and responded with 40 saplings planted before spring. And a love that grew as strong and lasting as the orchard itself, bearing fruit long after both of them had gone to their rest. The story of Adam and Rebecca Garrett became the story that defined Telluride for generations. A reminder that the Wild West was not just about gunfights and gold strikes, but also about ordinary people building extraordinary lives through love, hard work, and paying attention to what really matters. The apple trees stood as witnesses to that truth, blooming every spring in testament to a cowboy's grand romantic gesture and the lifetime of devotion that followed. Their great-great-grandchildren still tend the orchard today, still make preserves from the old family recipes, still tell visitors about the day Adam showed Rebecca what he had done and asked her to spend her life with him. The original 40 trees are mostly gone now, replaced by younger stock, but a few gnarled survivors remain, protected and honored as living history. And in the family archives, carefully preserved in the box Jamie built from apple wood, the story Adam and Rebecca wrote together still exists. Pages yellowed with age detail every moment of their courtship, every challenge of their early years together, every triumph and sorrow of a marriage that lasted more than 50 years. Rose's paintings illustrate key moments. Rebecca arriving in Telluride, Adam planting the saplings, their wedding day, the first harvest, and finally, an old couple sitting among mature trees, holding hands and smiling at each other with the comfort of decades of shared life. The last page of the document, written in Rebecca's careful script just weeks before her death, contains a simple message for future generations. Love is not about grand gestures, though those have their place. Love is about showing up every day, about listening to what the other person needs, about building something together that is stronger than what either of you could build alone. Adam planted apple trees because I was homesick, but he gave me so much more than fruit and blossoms. He gave me a home, a partnership, and a life full of meaning. That is the greatest gift anyone can give or receive. In the end, the story of She Said She Missed the Apple Trees Back East, the cowboy planted 40 saplings before spring became more than just a romantic tale from the Wild West. It became a blueprint for what love could be when two people truly committed to each other's happiness and worked together to build something lasting. The orchard remained, the family prospered, and the memory of Adam and Rebecca's love continued to inspire everyone who heard their story, proving that sometimes the most powerful legacy is not wealth or fame, but simply love made visible through actions that echo across generations.